Hello, everyone, and welcome into Coach Craig's Sports. Doing a live stream today. Had a couple other things going on this morning, so I was not able to make a video. So instead of doing the pre-recorded video, editing and all that, just doing a live stream today. So anybody that is out there joining, welcome in. If you're watching this on replay, definitely appreciate you checking it out as well. But pretty much what we're going to do here is going to go through the injuries for today's 6-game main slate, talk about my core picks on both DraftKings and FanDuel, and answer any questions that anyone may have, whether it's live as I'm going through it, or if you're on replay, feel free to comment down below and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible as well. But should be a pretty interesting slate overall. It's a pretty interesting week for NBA DFS in general as well, just because there's not any like major monster slates with the 10, 11 game, 12 game, 13 game like we see on a lot of slates, or a lot of weeks, excuse me, on like Mondays, not as much, but Wednesday and Friday. But we're going to get into it with the injuries in play for its slate overall. So the Pelicans are without Brandon Ingram, EJ Liddell, and Zion Williamson. Once again, we have Larry Nance listed as probable to play. He did not play one of the days this weekend, but he should be good to go in this game. So Pelicans could be a pretty interesting team overall, but we kind of know what we're getting out of them at this point in time. And a lot of these guys have been priced up pretty effectively. CJ McCollum, Jonas Valanciunas, if you're taking shots in GPPs. Larry Nance could get some minutes there. Maybe you want to go down to like a Willie Hernan Gomez, kind of a GPP dart throw pay down option, but don't think we really need to go down that far overall today. Trey Murphy's been the one that's been really disappointing as of late. Najee Marshall's been doing a little bit more of that scoring. So if you want to go to Marshall, I understand that, but not a guy that I'm particularly chasing myself. On the Wizards side, they're just without Bradley Beal. So we've seen this team pretty effectively without Bradley Beal. Kyle Kuzma, Kristaps Porzingis, Daniel Gafford. You can play all three of them on both sites. You can take stabs on Monty Morris if you want to. DeLon Wright is kind of a GPP pay down dart throw option at the point guard position on DraftKings. And then if you want to take some shots on like Denny Advia or Rui Hachimura off the bench, just hoping one of them gets hot and ends up closing, you can definitely do that in GPP formats as well. For the Chicago Bulls, they are without Lonzo Ball and Tony Bradley once again. Javonte Green's questionable to play tonight. We'll see if he plays or not. I believe he missed the last game out. Alex Caruso is listed as a game time decision, expected to play. He plans to play tonight. So probably not in that starting lineup since DeSomo's kind of taken over that point guard spot once again. But look for Alex Caruso to get back out there, play somewhere between 22 and 26 minutes tonight. Maybe a GPP pay down option more so on DraftKings, but not really chasing that today overall myself. Then for the Boston Celtics, we have Danilo Gallinari out once again, and then Marcus Smart joins him today. So probably going to see some type of different lineup out of Boston. The one they do have here is Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Grant Williams, and Al Horford. I expect it's probably going to be either Malcolm Brogdon or Peyton Pritchard starting in place of Marcus Smart tonight. That would be my most likely guess. But either way, Derek White and Malcolm Brogdon both going to get big bumps. If you wanted to play like a Peyton Pritchard as a GPP pay down option on either site, you can definitely do that as well. Just know the risk that does come with that at that point in time as well. For the Milwaukee Bucks, Chris Middleton, Serge Ibaka out tonight. Pretty standard run for this Bucks team. The big thing we're going to see here, Drew Holiday, if you want to play him in GPPs, you can. Just keep in mind, last two games out, he's played less than 20 minutes. The one game was a blowout, so we don't know how much he would actually played in that game. I do expect him to have some type of minutes sailing at 28 minutes, but his price tags come down a little bit, so if you want to go there, you can. A lot of these guys not really priority plays for me. Obviously, Giannis is live on any slate. Brooke Lopez, Bobby Portis, they're viable in GPPs if you want to go there. And then some different pay down options, whether it's a Pat Connaughton, a Grayson Allen, like a Joe Ingles, somebody like that. You can take shots there if you really want to, but not anything that you'd go out of your way for today overall. Knicks have RJ Barrett listed as doubtful, so he's likely out once again. Pretty similar to what we've seen out of the Knicks recently. Jalen Brunson's going to look pretty good. Taking some shots on Julius Randle. Mitchell Robinson's more of a GPP play, but pretty well priced on DraftKings overall today as well. I believe he's my second favorite center on the DraftKings side. Move down to the Spurs. A little bit of volatility here as we out. He's going to be out till probably after break. Keldon Johnson is listed as questionable to play. He pulled his hamstring 2 games ago, did not play the last game. If he plays, kind of standard run Spurs team minus Devin Vassell. If he doesn't end up playing, we could have some value on this slate overall with the Spurs team. Likely we see Romeo Langford start at shooting guard once again. Trey Jones, Jakob Poeltl, they're going to look pretty good. Jakob Poeltl is listed as a game time decision, but expected to play himself. He did not play last time out. If he were to miss for whatever reason, Zach Collins would look pretty decent on both sides as well. We'll see who kind of that fifth starter is, though. Is it a Keta Bates-Diop? Is it a Josh Richardson? Is it a Stanley Johnson for some odd reason? Is it Malachi Brandon? That's kind of the interesting question if Kellen Johnson starts. It does not start today, excuse me. So we could have some potential GPP options, some GPP paydown options, and Romeo Langford, Josh Richardson, Malachi Brandon, if you want to go there. I'm not on Jeremy Sohan myself personally today, but if you want to take that stab, you can do that as well. Trey Jones, Jakob Poeltl going to be the favorite ones, and then you got some pay down options as well. Kelly plays, you can't really trust it too much tonight. Seems like he's been burning me as of late. Then for the Memphis Grizzlies, we have a couple guys here that we need to talk about. Brandon Clark and Danny Green both out once again. Steven Adams is questionable. Jake LaRavia rejoined the team, but he's questionable with an ankle injury. And then we have John Morant questionable as well. Obviously, if John Morant plays tonight, you can play him pretty obviously. If he doesn't play, Tyus Jones is going to be pretty good. Another piece that we need to talk about here is Desmond Bane. He has not been back since he returned. There has been 2 opportunities for that. He's not listed with any injury nation at this point in time. We'll see if anything moves along. We'll see if anything pops up as the day moves along. But at this point in time, Desmond Bane's going to look pretty good. Look even better if John Morant doesn't play tonight. So could be pretty interesting overall. And then, Then we have Steven Adams is the other major talking point. If he doesn't play today, he missed yesterday with an illness. If he doesn't play today, Xavier Tillman's going to be very, very chalky today, especially if we get that news sooner rather than later. Obviously, if Steven Adams does play, you can play him. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. But Xavier Tillman could be a GPP pay down option type of play on both sides as well. Go down to the Lakers, who just had Troy Brown recently ruled out as of, like 10 minutes before I started recording. And then Anthony Davis, Austin Reeves, Lonnie Walker all out once again. So the Lakers are kind of running short on bodies here. LeBron James was downgraded to questionable. So obviously if he ends up missing, Russell Westbrook's going to look pretty good. Dennis Schroeder's going to look pretty good. Thomas Bryant's going to look pretty good. And then you got some other pay down options, whether it's a Patrick Beverly, a Max Christie, Juan Toscano Anderson, Wayne Gabriel. Not a lot of names that you really, really want to talk about at this point in time. Let me just click on their projected minutes just to make sure I'm not missing anybody that is worth mentioning at this point in time. Kendrick Nunn would be the other one that would be kind of interesting as a GPP play because we've seen him have some success in the past. He's reasonably cheap. He had a decent game a couple games ago as well, so maybe somebody that pops up. They just signed Sterling Brown to a 10-day contract. He's not anybody that we want because he's not like a great fantasy point per minute producer either way. Then on the Nuggets side, we got Colin Gillespie, Jeff Green, Peyton Watson all out once again, so nothing really to talk about there. Pretty standard Nuggets team overall. For the Orlando Magic, they're pretty much as healthy as they're going to be at this point in time. Jonathan Isaac's still out, covering from his knee injury. He hasn't played in like 2 years, so we'll see what happens. Supposedly, he's getting closer to returning. Chuma Okeke's out as well, and then Bobo is dealing with COVID at this point in time. So pretty standard Magic team, or at least what we've seen in the last couple of games. And then the Kings are all the way healthy at this point in time. So that's kind of a quick little rundown on all the injuries in play for tonight's slate. LeBron James is going to be a big one there. We're watching, obviously. John Morant are also going to be pretty big, as well as Keldon Johnson there. Then let's see. Not really other questionable ones. If there's anything else that does pop up throughout the rest of the day, I will note it down below in the comments. Also be updating all the other injuries, whether guys are in or out as well throughout the night, and as many starting lineups as I can get to. Good news is tonight it's only a 6-game main slate overall, but it is kind of spaced out for Monday as well. So I'm going to get rid of these at this point in time, and then we'll bring up DraftKings and talk about some core picks for today. So let me just get over to that. Make sure I hit the right tab. So we're on DraftKings now, and apparently I didn't put the DraftKings ones in, but I do have my notebook right in front of me, so we're going to do this real quick as I talk. So the first one is going to be Malcolm Brogdon. He's $5,300 on DraftKings. We're looking for 26, 27 fantasy points out of him. Good chance that he starts tonight. At the very least, he comes off the bench and plays more minutes than normal. Probably gets 28, 30 minutes in tonight's game. Close to a fantasy point per minute in this type of situation with no Marcus Smart out there. Probably going to lead the offense a little bit more. We've seen Peyton Pritchard sometimes get that start and then Brogdon stick with the second unit but still play more minutes or get an extra rotation, maybe even close. So that's kind of the situation we're looking at tonight. I currently have him projected for about 29, 30 points tonight. Then we're going to move down to shooting guard. We got Josh Richardson is going to be my shooting guard play at this point in time. He's $4,000. He gets decent run. He's almost kind of like that pseudo backup point guard for them since they don't really have anybody behind Trey Jones anyways. And then he's going to get some extra minutes too, especially if Kelton Johnson misses. He's $4,000. We're only looking for 20 points down. It's averaging 20.5 on the season. Currently, I'm projected for 22 tonight. Has a little bit of upside for more as well. If you want to play like a Romeo Langford or like a Doug McDermott in the spot too, if Kelton Johnson misses, that's definitely fine as well. Probably wouldn't play too many of those guys together because only so many guys can close. And you got to assume that Trey Jones, Jakob Pertl, Jeremy Sohan's probably going to close, I would assume. So then you get down to the Langford, the Doug McDermotts, you get to the Josh Richardsons, Malachi Branham. Two of those guys can close if Kelton Johnson is not there. So we'll just have to see how it all shakes out tonight, but there is some pretty good pay down options overall. So I do see here, Nightmare says, you just play cash games. No, I don't play. I actually don't just play cash games. I play more GPPs than anything. But when we're going through the core, we're talking about guys that are projecting 5 times or better. So sometimes that is going to be guys that are a little bit safer. Kind of when I talk through the injuries, we're talking about some guys that do have upside. Whether we go back to like some of those Wizards guys, maybe you're trying to get the Spurs guys right today. So there's kind of a lot of different options there as well. So the next one for me is Zach LaVine. He's a pretty safe play tonight. He's only $7,500 on the DraftKings side. You can play him at small forward. You can play him at shooting guard as well. $7,500. Looking for 37, 38 points down. That's exactly what he's averaging so far on the season. Been a little bit hot as of late. Currently, I'm projected for 39, 40 points tonight. Definitely does have some upside as we've seen in recent games, which is kind of nice to see just because he hasn't shown that quite as much this year, but pretty safe play overall, showing some more of that upside as of late. So definitely like attacking him tonight. Might be a little bit of a tougher matchup. Might get some Jaylen Brown on him, but you can't worry too much about that on NBA slates as well, because at the same time, like defense is an important part, but it's not as big as it used to be like in the NBA as well. Now, when we're speaking of upside, we got to talk about Jaren Jackson Jr. He's at power forward. He's $6,800. We're looking for 34 points down. He's averaging almost 35 on the season. Pace up spot tonight against the Spurs team. You're talking about going against Jeremy Sohan, who's also a guy that gets in a ton of foul trouble. Jaren Jackson is also a guy that gets in foul trouble. But the block upside here tonight, he might get some minutes at that center position too, especially if Steven Adams ends up missing. Then we get Xavier Tillman and probably a lot of Jaren Jackson Jr. at that 5 spot tonight. So definitely offers some upside there. Currently, I'm projected for 36. He's had some pretty good games as of late, once again, as well. If he gets the minutes, if he stays out of foul trouble, that's a guy that can help you out, especially in GPPs, but you can also play him in cash games tonight. Obviously, if Ja Morant doesn't play, it might help him out just a little bit. He might get a couple extra shots, but he's still also missing the spot for another playmaker that could open up some stuff for him as well. So I see Nightmare says, can you do FanDuel too? So I'm going to DraftKings first, and then we'll get over to FanDuel. So just kind of talking through this at this point in time. And then last but not least, we're doing the center position, and it's Daniel Gafford. He's $4,700, looking for 23, 24 points out of him. Currently, I'm projected for 28 fantasy points tonight. He's been playing, and this is just another guy, as long as he doesn't get in foul trouble, good fantasy point per minute guy. He's been getting 26 to 28 fantasy or minutes per game, since he's been starting alongside Kristaps Porzingis. There's still no Bradley Beal. So you get a lot of Gafford, you get a lot of Kuzma, you get a lot of Porzingis kind of as the main point scorers. Some games you get Rui Hachimura in there. Sometimes Denny Advia starts doing things. Very rarely you get a Monty Morris in there, but he pops up every once in a while too. But Gafford's kind of a main plug there. And so they're going against the Pelicans tonight. Maybe he gets in foul trouble against Valanciunas, but you can't really project it. And he's actually been better at staying out of foul trouble, at least so far this year, especially since he's been in that starting lineup. Gafford's definitely a guy that I like targeting on both DraftKings and FanDuel. Once again, if you want some upside, you want to do that big GPP play, Mitchell Robinson's out there. He's $5,200. I had him projected for 29 fantasy points tonight. Gafford just edged him out a little bit. If you want to play both of them together, don't have a problem with that. But Robinson, if he gets the minutes, if he's a guy that stays out of foul trouble, which is a little bit harder for him to do sometimes, he is a guy that could end up breaking the slate as well. And foul trouble might be a little sketchy against the Bucks too, because being that rim protector, Giannis coming into the paint, there is a chance that he gets in foul trouble. So maybe if you think Mitchell Robinson gets in foul trouble and you wanted to do a GPP pay down option that not a lot of people are talking about, maybe you look at Isaiah Hartenstein. But then you kind of run into that where maybe Mitchell Robinson gets in foul trouble, plays like 13, 14 minutes, and then Hartenstein and like Jericho Sims split the minutes. That is a chance that could happen. They could dust off Obi Toppin a little bit more and play him and Julius Randle alongside each other. There's a kind of a lot of variability to that. But Mitchell Robinson, definitely a guy, if he doesn't get in foul trouble, has some pretty good upside tonight as well. So now I'll stop sharing the screen for DraftKings, and then we'll get the screen up for FanDuel real quick. So I'm going to get the FanDuel screen up. Let's see. Nightmare's asking another thing here too. So do you think when one site price a player way higher than the other is a good signal? Typically, it's a good signal. And a lot of the times we've been seeing FanDuel be the higher price site, which makes FanDuel pricing a little bit tighter. And like a lot of the times you see less of an edge in terms of pricing on FanDuel, at least in recent history. But DraftKings, sometimes you get guys that are more expensive there. It kind of goes back and forth. But for the most part, when you're talking DraftKings, when you're talking FanDuel, guys project out pretty similar between sites because you get an extra bonus for 3-pointers. You get less of a detriment for turnovers on DraftKings, but you also get the steal and block, the extra point on FanDuel as well. So it kind of even out eventually. It just kind of depends on which player you're talking about. Obviously, guys that have big block or steal upside, like a Jaren Jackson Jr., if he gets 5 blocks, that's an extra 5 points. But when you're talking about like maybe a guy like Russell Westbrook, he gets 8 turnovers. That's -8 points as opposed to like -4 points on DraftKings. So there is a little bit there to it. It just kind of depends on the players overall as well. But FanDuel, just pricing is a little bit tighter on FanDuel, especially lately. So Trey Jones, point guard there, he's $6,200. Obviously, we'll get back to if Ja Morant plays or not. If Ja Morant doesn't play, we're not playing Trey Jones, or you're just playing him as your second point guard and you're playing his brother Tyus, who would be kind of your ideal point guard play at that point in time. And that would apply to both sites just because we've seen what he's done this year. He's at a reasonable price tag. You know he's going to get the minutes. And I have no idea at this point in time whether or not Ja Morant is going to play tonight or not. A lot of times for these injuries, I have kind of a good tell whether guys are going to play or not. Most days it's pretty good. Every once in a while, there's kind of one that we don't really know. Today, those ones that are kind of up in the air, really Keldon Johnson, is he going to play or not? Ja Morant, is he going to play or not? Obviously missed yesterday. I think there's a good chance that he plays tonight. Steven Adams, I think, plays, but he's got that illness sometimes. And when we're just talking about injuries and illnesses and all that too, if a guy is questionable due to illness and he ends up playing, I'm not playing him that night personally, because we've seen too many times where a guy goes out there, he tries to play, he's been dealing with like a little bit of a stomach bug or something. He goes out, he plays 8 minutes, and then he doesn't check back in the game after that. Anthony Davis did that a couple times last year, I feel like. I know there's one very, very popular one where he played like 4 minutes, and then he's just like, I'm done for the day. I got stuck on that one too. And he's just, when a guy doesn't feel the best, it's a little bit riskier too. But it also, you can talk about ownership too. So let's see. So Nightmare's here. Brandon Clark's out. So Tillman should be a lock if his price hasn't moved. So I don't think you necessarily have him. Obviously, he got more minutes yesterday because Steven Adams didn't end up playing. So they have some options at that center position. I wonder if Lofton's up with the main team right now at this point in time. I have not looked into that too. He was doing really well in the G League, and he's another option they could run out at that 5 spot besides Jaren Jackson and Tillman. Last year they had Killian Tilly, but they don't really have him at this point in time. They had a couple extra big men than they do at this point in time. But when you're talking about Tillman, he's going to be a lock if Steven Adams is out. But if Steven Adams plays, he's just a GPP pay down option that's pretty good for his price tag overall. Let's see. We got Josh here. So Ben Kiro, big night tonight. There's always a chance. He's one of those guys too, like his price tag's really, really stabilized in terms of where he's at on both sites. You're kind of projecting most nights around that 40 points on each site. Going against the Kings, definitely a good defensive matchup and a little bit of pace up spot too. So definitely a guy that you want to target in GPPs. Don't think you necessarily have to play him in cash or anything else like that. But even going back to Nightmare's question before, kind of those price tags that vary a lot from site to site. Another guy on that Magic's team, Markel Fultz, he's like $7,500 on draft or on FanDuel and like $6,100 on DraftKings. So if you want to take a shot on him on one site, you're going to be on the DraftKings side. But I think that should be a pretty back and forth game. I don't think either team's really going to pull away from it. If you want to take shots on Paulo Banchero, if you want to put like De'Aaron Fox on the other side, I think you can definitely do that tonight. Not big on Sabonis right now. It's just one thing that I'm not super, super big on. Wendell Carter Jr. is decent defensive center too as well. Obviously been a little bit banged up this year. Maybe he gets something on Sabonis tonight. I don't know. That could be an interesting GPP option too as well. Most of the other Magic guys are kind of priced up at this point in time. But Banchero, if you want to take a shot there, Fultz on DraftKings, and then Carter, if you want to take GPP shots there too. I do like De'Aaron Fox though on Sacramento, but I've been liking him a lot lately, and he's doing better, been doing pretty well lately too. So I haven't looked at Prize Picks yet. If anybody's here that does play on Prize Picks, kind of rambling off a little bit here as well. But back to the FanDuel core picks that we were trying to do. Got off on that little tangent because talking about Trey Jones, looking for 31 on him, got him projected for 31, 32 fantasy points tonight. There is a lot more opportunities if Keldon Johnson doesn't play in this game. Somebody's got to shoot the ball. Trey Jones has stepped up a little bit more in that department, which was not really something we've seen too much in him in the past, because in the past, he's just kind of filled in when DeJounte Murray's been out. We saw him at Duke, and he was playing with Zion Williamson, RJ Barrett, and Cam Reddish. He never had a chance to shoot the ball half the time because he was, he was playing with those guys and doing more of the facilitating role than anything. So that's kind of where we're at with him, but his usage rate definitely does go up without Devin Vassell, and then it probably goes up even more without Keldon Johnson, especially tonight, because somebody's got to take those shots. It's not really going to be Sohan. Langford will every once in a while, but it's kind of hit or miss whether those go in. Josh Richardson will do a little bit, but Doug McDermott, that's a guy that could shoot the ball if he need to tonight. If he gets some extra run, he could be an interesting GPP guy. Then we move down to shooting guard. We got Malcolm Brogdon once again. He's $5,800. This is kind of another one. $500 more on DraftKings. $5,300 or $500 more than on DraftKings. Excuse me. 53 on DraftKings. 58 on FanDuel. Still looks like a good spot. He may or may not start in this game, as I talked about on the DraftKings side. 30 minutes in this game. Probably ends up closing. If he's playing well, definitely has a lot of upside in GPPs. If he's not playing well, still probably a guy that's going to get you about 28 points. So that can't really go wrong with him tonight. Kind of the next one at small forward. It's kind of one. It's not a super exciting play. Nobody really gets excited about playing Michael Porter at this point in time. Once upon a time, we were supposed to be getting excited about playing this guy because he's supposed to be one of those next prospects, but the injuries have really hurt him, the back injuries especially. $5,500 a little bit too cheap for him, though. 27, 28 fantasy points is what you're looking at him. A lot of times he's been right around 26 tonight. Pace up spot against the Lakers. Not the greatest defensive team in the world either. There might not be LeBron James in this game, so there is some blowout risk there as well, but if it's a back and forth game, could be pretty good for Michael Porter. He's a guy that I typically don't like recommending in my core picks just because when everything's looked really good for him this year, it hasn't always gone right, but a pretty good spot overall, pretty good price tag as well. Then we move down to power forward. You can also play him at small forward if you really want to. Same thing with Michael Porter Jr. Kyle Kuzma. This is another guy, $7,500 on FanDuel, $8,400 on DraftKings. So this is kind of the reverse one. This is typically we see our FanDuel is a little bit more expensive than DraftKings, but there is no Bradley Beal once again. We kind of know what we're getting with Kyle Kuzma at this point. It's right around 40 points. Got him projected for 39-40 tonight. Decent matchup against the Pelicans. Hopefully a back and forth game unless one of these teams just bombs and it turns into a blowout. Don't really think that's going to be the case though, but pretty solid play at $7,500. We're looking for 37, 38 points at him. Got him projected a couple points over there. Does have a little bit of upside for more if he's shooting the ball well once again. Then at center, we have Daniel Gafford. He's just kind of the safe play tonight, honestly. So maybe if you're playing cash, you play him. He's $5,600. So he's $900 more than he is on DraftKings. Got him projected for 28 fantasy points tonight as long as he gets out of foul trouble, doesn't stay in foul trouble. Let's put it that way. Against Jonas Valanciunas, he should be pretty good overall. If you're looking at this position a little bit more, I do have up. Let me just bring my Patreon up too as well, just so we can talk a little bit of GPP type of options. But I need to bring that up on my other screens because I'm on Google Chrome right now and the Patreon's on Firefox. So bear with me. I'll bring that up real quick. And we'll just kind of go over some of that too as well, because there are options between like cash and which I'm like kind of splitting myself as of late. So, so Nightmare, I do see your comment here. Let me see if I can get that up real quick. Are these the guys you're gonna have in most of your lineups? So yeah, for the most part, these are going to be my core five. These are going to be the guys that I'm gonna have in most of my lineups. When I do these videos on the daily, typically pre-recorded, typically edited and kind of posted. And I do update my core down in the comments throughout the day. I do update the injuries down in the comments throughout the day and get to as many starting lineups as I can throughout the night. So like if there's any major changes, like, hey, we find out Keldon Johnson's not playing for sure, and like we find out, I don't know who would be starting, that would make a big difference. Let's just say Doug McDermott starts, because Doug McDermott, we really haven't seen over 24 minutes too much this season. But if he's all of a sudden starting, there's a better chance that he plays 26 minutes tonight. And at $3,200 on DraftKings, that's going to look like an excellent play. Already looks like a pretty good play on DraftKings at $3,200, where I'm projected for like 18 points tonight. But I'm trying to bring up today's NBA DFS. So this is over on my Patreon, patreon.com/CoachCraigSports. Small monthly donation, less than a cup of coffee. Is give me that 5 times or more for me, kind of my player pool for the day overall. So on DraftKings, just kind of highlighting some point guards. I just almost kind of a guy that's in GPPs. He's been playing more minutes, but Caruso's back tonight. Brogdon, we already talked a lot about. Trey Jones, we talked a pretty good amount about. Dennis Schroeder looks pretty good tonight, especially if LeBron does not end up playing. He's a great GPP option at that point in time, but he's probably going to be a little bit more popular. He's been playing really well as of late as well. So I see Nightmare here. How do you identify a good chalk versus bad chalk? A lot of it's just knowing. A lot of it just comes down to like minutes projections and stuff too, and knowing how guys score and like the most likely outcomes. So there was a couple nights ago where like Wayne Gabriel was a super chalky option. He was like 30% ownership, just because he was like, I don't even remember how much he was, like $3,700 on DraftKings or something like that. Or no, he was 32, I want to say, on DraftKings and like 38 on FanDuel. So Wayne Gabriel, not a great fantasy point per minute producer. Wasn't guaranteed to be in the starting lineup either, and I don't think he ended up being in the starting lineup that night. So you're looking at a guy that's probably going to play like 20 minutes at that point. If he starts, maybe he plays 26, 28. But even then, you're talking about a guy, maybe he's like 0.7 fantasy points per minute. Not always going to pay off in that situation. So typically you want to see guys that are going to get minutes. They're going to have a role to success. Like either they're in the starting lineup, or like the Spurs situation tonight's kind of an interesting one too, just because if Keldon Johnson doesn't play, you want guys that can go out there and at least get shots up, which there's not that a lot of guys on the Spurs team that can do that. A lot of it just comes down to price point projections, kind of past performances too, especially if you in like a situation where like say Keldon Johnson's not playing tonight and we have a long history, like, hey, when this happens, this guy does well, instead of like just assuming somebody does well, if that makes sense. Getting back to some Patreon here too. Jalen Brunson's a guy I liked a lot tonight too, or I can't say like a lot, but he's a pretty safe play just because I believe he's $8,100 and $7,900, projects right around 40, 41 points. Has some upside as we've seen in games if he's getting out there really hot. Russell Westbrook, a guy that's playing really well as of late. If LeBron doesn't play tonight, he's probably going to be pretty popular. If LeBron plays tonight and he's kind of questionable, I don't mind going to Russell Westbrook and GPPs at that point. The price tag is just a little bit higher than you like. De'Aaron Fox feels like a guy that like a lot of people just don't play, and he does have pretty good upside. He's been pretty safe as of late too. There's been a couple down games in there here and there where he just doesn't shoot the ball well, but he's been playing pretty well as of late. And with that Sabonis injury, so if you don't know, Sabonis hurt his thumb. He's got like an avulsion fracture in his thumb and a torn UCL. It's the same injury Bam Adebayo had last year, where he had surgery and he was out for like almost 2 months. So he's playing through it. The Kings really want to make the playoffs because they had the longest playoff drought in NBA. I'm not sure if it's in NBA history, but it's definitely in the NBA. So that's kind of something to talk about. That's why he's playing through it. But his price tag is so elevated because he was playing monster minutes before. He's been cut back a little bit on some of his minutes, and he's not been quite as effective because obviously he's injured. So I like Fox a lot in that regard. Kevin Huerter's been playing out of his mind too as of late. So he's a GPP option, but he's a little bit too pricey to be like a core player or somebody I would play in cash personally myself. CJ McCollum's definitely a great GPP option because there is no Zion, there's no Brandon Ingram tonight. Him and Jonas Valanciunas, both great GPP options on both sides, just because they're fairly priced, and if they have their upside games, they're going to look really good. Delon Wright was a GPP pay down option for the Wizards on DraftKings. Cheap price tag. You might get 20 plus points out of him if he goes out there, he plays well, or Monte Morris doesn't play well. Morris gets injured or foul trouble or something like that. There's always that option. Cole Anthony is a GPP only guy in my mind. He doesn't project terribly. He's got a reasonable price tag. If Marco Fultz gets in foul trouble or gets injured or anything, there's a chance that he really pays off. So I see Nightmare 2. Since you only have one center spot on FanDuel, do you have other options? So yeah, that's kind of the bad part about FanDuel sometimes is you only have the one center options. And a lot of these guys only have center eligibility. So the on FanDuel, these are the guys this morning. So Mitchell Robinson's a GPP like upside type of guy. Same thing with like Wendell Carter. Daniel Gafford's kind of your safe play. Nikola Jokic is a relatively safe play on FanDuel tonight as well. Projects out, 5 times or 5.1 times value. If you get the upside game out of him, obviously we know what Nikola Jokic can do. He's going to get you 70, 80 points. And at that point, he's a really good play. But we saw that long stretch where he was doing it. Kind of been a little down as of late, and there is a chance of blowout in that game too. So that's kind of where we weigh the options, but should have a pretty good matchup tonight. Thomas Bryant has some upside, especially if LeBron James doesn't play. Jakob Poeltl has upside if he ends up playing, which is expected since he's probable tonight. I do see Stevens down here was saying Steven Adams is questionable. Yep, saw that, went over a little bit if you weren't here in the beginning where I went through some of the injuries. He had an illness yesterday, didn't play yesterday. So if he ends up playing, you can play him. If he doesn't end up playing, we already got Brandon and Clark out. Xavier Tillman's going to look really good. Play a decent amount of Jaren Jackson as well. And then I see he has any love for Dennis Schroeder. Dennis Schroeder is going to look pretty good. He's been playing really well. If LeBron's out, he looks even better. The only thing with him is his price tag's been coming up in recent days. So that is one thing to consider there. Back to the centers, we kind of have Jonas Valanciunas as kind of one of those other GPP upsides, which I kind of touched on with CJ McCollum as well. And then if you really wanted to pay down at center or pay down more so on DraftKings would be Robert Williams. He has GPP upside on both sides. Need a little bit more upside on FanDuel. But, we're talking about Marcus Smart being out. There is a lineup where they just go double big and Robert Williams finally starts again. But that's not always the case. We might see Peyton Pritchard. We might see Malcolm Brogdon being that fifth starter. We might see Robert Williams. We might see Grant Williams. We might see, I don't know if there's anybody else that would start. Those would probably be the four most likely alongside Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Derek White, and Al Horford. Who knows? Maybe this is the night that Robert Williams starts over Al Horford. I don't think that's going to be the case, but that's an option that's out there. So Steven says best GPP value on FanDuel. So probably the best one, or I'll say two of the best ones were in the core picks with Malcolm Brogdon. He projects out reasonably well at his price tag. If he has the upside game, he's a guy that's going to be very good in GPPs. Same thing with Kyle Kuzma. Projects out really well for his price tag. And then if he hits the ceiling game, it's going to look pretty good as well. You can also go back to like CJ McCollum, Jonas Valanciunas. They're pretty reasonably priced. If they hit their ceilings, they're obviously going to look really good. Then we get to like Jalen Brunson, who looks pretty good, has the ceiling anyways. Let's see who else is in here. Trey Murphy's like a sneaky one just because like if he goes out and he actually shoots the ball well, and he gets more minutes once again, like he could be very good in GPP only at $4,500 on FanDuel, but we haven't seen it like at all lately. So there is that. Let's see who else kind of stands out in that regard. So those are kind of the main ones, but and it's like all the centers because obviously you have big center upside with guys like Nikolai Jokic, Jonas Valanciunas, Mitchell Robinson if he doesn't get in foul trouble, which is a little bit risky versus the Bucks. But if you get a 5-block game out of Mitchell Robinson against the Bucks and he plays 30 minutes, he might just be the best GPP value at center as well. Let's see where I was at because we were talking some point guards, mainly on DraftKings first. So Steven asked, do you think Ja Morant plays? So this is the hard one. This I kind of touched on this a little bit before. Typically, I have a pretty good indication whether or not guys are going to play. I don't have a good, strong feeling about Ja Morant playing today. I think there's a decent chance he plays, but the fact that they haven't like ruled out Desmond Bane or made him questionable on the back-to-back, like they have both back-to-backs since he's been healthy, is maybe an indication that Ja Morant doesn't play tonight. And in that case, you just play Tyus Jones on both sides. Pretty simple there. Desmond Bane would look pretty good then. That's another guy that could be your GPP value as well because he looks pretty good at his price tag. If Ja Morant doesn't play, he does have that extra upside as well. Let's see. Figure out where I was here with the Patreon notes. So Peyton Pritchard, GPP pay down option on both sides. If you want to go there, if he starts, he looks a little bit better, but not a great fantasy point per minute producer. But if he gets hot, makes a couple threes, might get some extra minutes in the game too if he ends up starting, which they have done before and kept Brogdon with the second unit, but then just let Brogdon close. So that is a option as well. Spurs guys are kind of all GPP value options as well. Whether you're talking Malachi Brown, Brandon, Josh Richardson, Romeo Langford, Doug McDermott on both sides. All those guys have potential upside if Keldon Johnson doesn't play. Once again, going to come down to who closes in this game besides Trey Jones and Jakob Poeltl. Assume Sohan's going to be one of them, but he could also get in foul trouble. So you might have 3 options available at that point in time. Zach LaVine was the guy that I like more on DraftKings because he's safe play, but does have some upside as well. On FanDuel, he's a little bit more expensive, so not that we're trying to go there as well. Let's see if anybody else stands out. Denny Advia, GPP only on DraftKings. He's $4,200, $5,200 on FanDuel. So quite the price difference there. He projects out reasonably well if he gets the extra minutes. If he closes, he's going to look pretty good overall. Same thing with Rui Hachimura. So I do see about Gary Harris here. Gary Harris is cheap, but like he's a guy that's probably going to get 26, 28 minutes. Not a great fantasy point per minute producer. He just needs especially like on FanDuel, he needs to get a couple steals. He needs to hit a couple threes and stay in the game that way. So like he's a cheap option, but he kind of has a cap ceiling. So if you're playing him, maybe just chase one of those Spurs guys instead, I would probably say. And then let's see where we're at. I'm trying to remember how much Herb Jones is on FanDuel because he's kind of another guy that's similar that kind of has a little bit more guaranteed minutes, but not super excited about him. But I think he's closer to $5,900 on FanDuel. Let's see. Kyle Kuzma has upside on both sides. Paolo Banchero has upside on both sides. That's kind of the big question is just kind of who steps up for the Lakers besides Schroeder, Westbrook, and Thomas Bryant if LeBron doesn't play. Like you can take your shots on Wayne Gabriel there. You can take your shots on Juan Toscano Anderson. They don't look good, but they can get minutes. Like Kendrick Nunn is kind of the guy that could like be a GPP winner in that point, but we're not guaranteed that either because you're going to have Westbrook out on the court a decent amount. You're going to have Dennis Schroeder out on the court a decent amount, and they're kind of both ball dominant or whatever, and not the biggest guys in the world. So now you're going to throw Kendrick Nunn as kind of the third guy, and are all three really going to be out there at the same time? It's kind of an interesting proposition at that point, but they only have so many bodies tonight if LeBron doesn't play. So LeBron's minutes got to go somewhere. You know, if he's playing 36, 37 minutes a night, that has to go somewhere. And there's no Troy Brown where it would typically go a lot of times. And if Damon Jones is still kind of banged up, technically he's not on the injury report, but they haven't been playing him either. And he missed the other game a couple games ago. Not sure if he missed over the weekend at all. Wayne Gabriel's probably just the backup center that might get some extra run as well. You just kind of get into this situation where you're just like, everything's kind of decent, but it's also like not the greatest at the same time. But take some shots on some cheap Lakers guys if you want to do it. Take some shots on some those Spurs guys, especially if Keldon Johnson misses. Let's see what we got here. So Fultz or CJ McCollum, best bang for your buck. So I assume we're talking FanDuel still. CJ McCollum would be the option there because Fultz is a little bit overpriced on FanDuel. Obviously, he had the great game last game, but he had 6 steals too. That was 18 free points there essentially. So you'll have that sometimes, but Fultz has a lot more ways that things can go wrong for him because he can lose minutes to Cole Anthony. If Jalen Suggs randomly plays more minutes, he can lose minutes to him as well. If he gets in foul trouble, if he gets hurt again, you don't like to say injury with some players, but Fultz has that long history of injuries as well. CJ McCollum, you can argue he's the best player on their team right now. Probably not even much of an argument, I guess. Jonas Valanciunas is a pretty good fantasy point per minute producer as well, but they don't play him big minutes or they haven't as much lately. So CJ kind of goes out there. He can get a shot whenever he wants to. He can kind of facilitate. Hasn't been the best shooting year for him. Kind of been a down season for him, but we've seen him make very, very good success without Zion in the lineup before too, as well, in terms of fantasy points. He's pretty well rested. I believe he got the last game off as well, where Alvarado came in. So definitely don't mind him once again tonight. Should play 36 minutes or so. Let's see who else was here that could stand out. Keegan Murray's kind of like a weird one on DraftKings because he's cheap. He's been playing minutes once again. He hasn't played well this year, but he's just so cheap that you take shots there, especially if everybody else is taking shots on other spots. Aaron Gordon kind of been playing on both sides in GPP only, but there is some blowout. That game, his price tag's a little bit higher. Roger Murray, GPP only guy on DraftKings. Scoop him on FanDuel if you really wanted to, but odds are a little bit lower there. The thing is, on playing both sides, he can offer 50 plus on any night, especially with no Bradley Beal. Just haven't seen it quite as recently. Let's see. That's pretty much what I have in the Patreon notes. Let's see if there's anybody else that stood out on FanDuel that didn't on DraftKings as well. I'll say I think CJ McCollum is a decent bang for your buck there. I think he's going to be more popular than De'Aaron Fox. I haven't really looked too much at ownership rankings on a couple sites that I follow yet, but that is something that could be in play as well. Desmond Bane, I like as long as he's playing. If John Morant doesn't play, he looks pretty good. Maybe if everybody starts going to Malcolm Brogdon, we go to Derek White a little bit too. That's something to pay attention to ownership wise. And then let's see if anybody else really stands out on FanDuel. Pretty much it at this point in time. If anybody has any other questions, I'd definitely be willing to answer them, whether it is stream or on afterwards. I see Steven says, would you play Andre Drummond on FanDuel? So the thing with Andre Drummond is he's a very, very good fantasy point per minute producer. He kind of needs Nikolai Vucevic to get in foul trouble or something else, or them to play alongside each other, which they did just like a teeny tiny amount when Derrick Jones Jr. was out. Don't really think that's going to be the case. He hasn't played too many minutes as of late. I don't even remember what his price tag is on FanDuel at this point in time. So I'm going to look real quick. He's one of those guys, he's always in plays like a GPP pay down option type, $4,200. And I believe the recent games, we're just going to bring his game log up here. 11 minutes, 8 minutes, 0 minutes, 6 minutes, 13 minutes. If you're going to play him, you have to know that this can go very, very wrong. And it's only a GPP lineup, saving some money. You're paying up elsewhere, and have some relatively safe guys that do have some upside, and then just hope he goes off and get some extra minutes. But you're also betting on a proposition that's probably only going to pay off like 10% of the time at most. So that's kind of where I would land on him. There was times this year where it was looking a little bit better, but now kind of with Derrick Jones Jr. back and Vucevic playing pretty well as of late too, it's just not been the case, at least over the last few games as well. But that's pretty much what I got at this point in time. If anybody does have any last questions, leave them in the comments here on the live stream or just on the video in general, especially if you're watching on replay. But once again, do appreciate everybody that did tune in. Pretty interesting slate tonight, a 6-game main slate overall. If there's any injury news or kind of updates to my core throughout the night, I will list it down in the comments of this video as well. Let's see here. Travis did ask a question here. So would it be wrong to completely fade Giannis, LeBron, Joker tonight? So LeBron, there's the chance that he doesn't play. So fading him at that point would not be the worst in the world. Okay, let's just say LeBron doesn't play. Fading Jokic wouldn't be the worst thing in the world because there is a chance of blowout there. I don't like projecting blowout because a lot of times when you think it's going to be a blowout, it isn't. And then these other games that we think are going to be competitive sometimes end up being blowouts too as well. Let's see. Mevi said LeBron is out tonight. They just confirmed. So I will check some of my sources there too, just to make sure I see anything at this point. So fading him's not the end of the world then at that point, but we'll see you like a Russell Westbrook be a lot more chalky. Dennis Schroeder and Thomas Bryant would probably be my guess. Giannis is probably the hardest one to fade at that point in time, but the price tag's up there. So if you take his price tag, you're splitting it across a couple other players, and those guys go off. It's not the craziest thing in the world. There is games where Giannis wasn't doing the best. Obviously, he's been a little bit better as of late. We'll see how many minutes Drew Holiday plays tonight. That makes a big difference for their team as well. Let me just open this page up for the LeBron part. Yeah, LeBron is listed as out on the RotoWire lineups, which I was sharing earlier as well. So, like, this Lakers team, like, somebody has to be a value here, but like figuring out who that guy is going to be is kind of the question. So, Thomas Bryant's going to look good. Russell Westbrook's going to look good. Dennis Schroeder's going to look good. Patrick Beverley's going to play probably a lot of minutes, but he's kind of a defensive only guy. So you kind of have to hope that he pays off defensive stats wise and hits some threes and plays big minutes. So that's kind of a hard proposition. But like we're looking at some of these other guys. Juan Toscano-Anderson, not great fantasy point per minute producer. Wayne Gabriel, same thing. Not great fantasy point per minute producer. One of them is going to start at power forward tonight in place of LeBron. What's this starting lineup look like? Thomas Bryant, Dennis Schroeder and Patrick Beverley are going to start for sure. Those three will start for sure. We're going to get one of Juan Toscano-Anderson, one of Juan Toscano-Anderson plus Wayne Gabriel. We might get both. Hopefully we don't get both. But then we got guys like Max Christie, who's not great fantasy point per minute producer as well. Kendrick Nunn is the guy to take a stab on tonight. But the hard part is it's harder for him to be out there alongside Schroeder, Beverley, and Westbrook. They might do it. They might have to do it tonight just to get the best players you can get on the floor with Thomas Bryant too. But this game might just end up being a blowout either way at this point in time. I don't like projecting blowouts, but this Lakers team is so thin. Maybe you fade Russell Westbrook tonight just because it goes two ways for him. He's just going to be chalky. He's going to do everything and he's going to look really good. Or they just get blown out and he just plays 20 minutes, 24 minutes or whatever. So that is a tricky one. You almost there's a sense where you kind of want to pseudo punt this game, but you also want some of the value pieces as well. But the value pieces are not great fantasy point per minute guys. Like Beverly's not great. Max Christie's not great. Juan Toscano-Anderson, Wayne Gabriel aren't great either, but they're pretty cheap. So like you have to outweigh that. They signed Sterling Brown a 10-day contract. He's not great fantasy point per minute guy either. Played 3 minutes, I believe, the 2 games he's played so far, and it's all been like blowout run. So not really too interested there. Dennis Schroeder is the guy that I want the most exposure to out of the Lakers tonight. Thomas Bryant would be number 2. Probably Russell Westbrook after that, but I do have some interest in Kendrick Nunn and GPPs as a type of pay down option as well. But that's kind of where I'm at. If you guys have any more questions, going to try to jump off here. But once again, do appreciate everybody that jumped on. Be sure to check out the Patreon as well, patreon.com/CoachCraigSports. Do the post the guys that project out for 5 times better or 5 times value or better at the beginning of the day for me. So that's kind of my player pool as I'm going about the process of doing projections in the morning. Hoping to do some prize picks videos in the coming days as well. Just do some short, probably 4 or 5 minute videos where I just go over some of my favorite plays for the day as well. But once again, do appreciate everybody that came out today. Watch the video. If you want to see more videos like this, be sure to subscribe to my channel, have those notifications turned on so you never miss a video. Monday through Friday core pick videos. Typically they're pre-recorded. Today I had a couple things going on this morning, so I just wasn't able to do the pre-recorded section. So jumped on the live stream, didn't have to worry about the editing and everything else like that. If you're watching on replay, I do appreciate you checking it out as well.